Hello and welcome to Penglis Online News. This is news from a conservative libertarian perspective. All issues and topics covered will have that clear point of view. The goal of Penglis Online News, as always, is to inspire new ideas, to invent new terms, new definitions, and new language for you to use, and to give you new ways of looking at and thinking about the news. There are great news services out there that have all the information, the statistics, and the latest facts. What I hope to provide is a different perspective and analysis as I look at the news not as headlines, but with the benefit of some time and reflection to give you a better and more comprehensive picture of what's going on. Welcome now to Penglis Online News. The Obama foreign policy continues to spiral out of control, going from one disaster to another, and with each successive event, there is further evidence that it is sheer folly to elect a president who clings desperately to their ideology and ignores the interests of the nation. The clear evidence is the current crisis in Iraq, where everything gained has been ever so quickly lost. The question for us is, how did we get here? Walter Mead of the Wall Street Journal, in an August 2013 article, tried to explain how the Obama goal was to work with moderate Islamist groups, like there is such a thing, to make the Middle East more democratic, like that is even possible. It was thought by aligning the U.S. government with so-called moderate Muslims, the radicals and terrorists would be marginalized and isolated. Then the moderate Muslims, with U.S. financial support, would come to power and bring improved economic and social conditions, which would steer Middle East populations away from the terrorists and fanatics. That staggering naivete, which continues to this day, proves that the Obama administration has learned nothing from their legendary failures, believing still in their ideology and sacrificing our country in the process. We all saw how that philosophy worked for Mohammed Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. Fast forward to Benghazi. Here, the Obama administration, which believes they can do no wrong, let 4 brave Americans, including our ambassador, be murdered in a coordinated terrorist attack on our embassy in Benghazi. This was an act of war, which required a war response. Instead, the administration blamed a video for causing a spontaneous protest, despite this video having less than 100 views before the attack. So why do they do this? Andrew McCarthy, writing May 1st of this year, connects how the failure of the Obama policy empowering Islamic Supremacists, the more accurate term for Obama's moderate Muslims, contributed directly to the massacre at Benghazi. Also, that the president was reckless in leaving Americans in Benghazi without sufficient protection, where the priority was to portray Libya as a policy success, right before the 2012 election, where now it's a disaster. Which is why the administration had to find something else to blame. Hence, the video excuse. Rather than control al-Qaeda and other radical terrorist groups, the administration actually strengthened them and emboldened actions like Benghazi. Back to Egypt. McCarthy writes that Obama's support for the Muslim Brotherhood made Egypt a very hospitable place for al-Qaeda and other jihadist terrorists. The State Department knew weeks ahead of time that our embassy in Cairo was in for an attack on September 11th of 2012 from those terrorist groups. The goal of the attack was to take American hostages to exchange for the blind sheikh, who planned the first bombing of the World Trade Center, who was serving a life sentence instead of being executed. This is what makes the release of 5 Taliban terrorist leaders in exchange for Army deserter Bo Bergdahl so devastating. The terrorist groups already had plans for taking hostages in exchange for getting their terrorists back. Now that the president has made it clear that he will trade terrorists for anyone, the terrorists will be emboldened to take as many hostages as they want. Yet another failure in a chain of failures before it, all with progressively worse consequences. Back to Benghazi and Cairo. The State Department also knew in advance about the video excuse they would use to cover for the Obama failure to suppress al-Qaeda, as they tweeted messages condemning the video while the attack on our Cairo embassy was still underway. So the strategy to blame a video to cover for yet another policy failure was planned weeks ahead of the attack in Cairo, and so it was only logical to continue the cover-up of policy failure by using the same video excuse to explain the attack by al-Qaeda in Benghazi. And that is how Cairo, Egypt, and Benghazi, Libya are linked. And that is why these are not isolated incidents, but a series of preventable failures brought about by a failed ideology that never changes. Penglis Online News is brought to you by The Complete Guide to Flight Instruction, which is my sarcastic and blunt critique of our flight training system and how to fix it. Also, if you want to learn to fly, if you want all the secrets, all the inside information, all the things that will really get you through the flight training system efficiently, quickly, and with all kinds of information you're not going to get from any other source, please consult The Complete Guide to Flight Instruction, available from Amazon.com. Doug Hagman, writing in Canada Free Press on May 12th of this year, has more information. He believes that Benghazi was, quote, the largest central logistics, control, and coordination center for weapons, arms, and manpower in the Middle East, unquote. Hagman believes the CIA compound in Benghazi, along with 6 or so nearby warehouses, CIA and State Department operatives, and government subcontractors were all at the center of creating a rebel force to oust President Assad of Syria. The CIA operatives created a supply line for the Muslim Brotherhood, which ran from Libya through Turkey to Syria to arm and equip the rebels. Benghazi, like the Iran-Contra scandal, involves the illegal transfer of weapons and resources. All of this requires a cover-up to prevent this information from becoming common knowledge. The goal of the attack on Benghazi by al-Qaeda was to destroy that network and supply line. The greatest beneficiary of Syrian President Assad's ouster would be Saudi Arabia, and the Saudis are quite happy to use our intelligence agencies and military subcontractors in Benghazi to do it, with the approval and consent of the Obama administration. So far, the Saudis are getting what they want. After all, it was Obama who bowed to the Saudi king, not the other way around, and now we know why. The House has appointed a select committee to look into all this, but nothing has happened yet. The question for us is what charges could be brought against the president and other members of his administration should they be found culpable in the murders perpetrated in Benghazi. There is an unexplained gap of 18.5 hours during the Benghazi and Cairo attacks where the president is unaccounted for, according to Canada Free Press. The charge that most likely could be brought by the House Select Committee is criminally negligent homicide. Hot Air reports that State Department Deputy Greg Hicks reported to Congress that Special Operations Command Africa told Lieutenant Colonel Gibson and his team that they could not fly to Benghazi from Tripoli to aid those at the CIA compound and our embassy. This is what is called a stand-down order. Why was that order given? Is it possible that had the regular military saved our people in Benghazi, that the whole operation to aid Syrian rebels from Benghazi would have been discovered? This is something the House Select Committee has to investigate, but it bears direct relevance to the crime of criminally negligent homicide. The website laws.com states that criminal negligence is negligence that usually involves the death of another. Criminally negligent homicide is willful and wanton conduct that causes the death of another. Negligence, according to the Wise Geek website, are actions so egregious as to be considered criminal. Most crimes are defined by actions, where negligence is a specific inaction, where a duty owed to others is breached. The standard is what a reasonable person would have done in that situation and compare it to the defendant. In the case of Obama and Benghazi, would a reasonable person have been there in the Situation Room during the entire attack on Cairo and Benghazi, and would they have done everything in their power, including the ordering of military strikes and rescue operations, to save our ambassador and everyone else from the organized and coordinated terrorist attack underway? Or would a reasonable person have ignored the situation, been absent for 18.5 hours, gotten a good night's sleep, flown off to a fundraiser, and then lied to the nation that the attack was the result of an obscure video carefully selected weeks ahead of time? And that is why the charge of criminally negligent homicide is the most likely charge to come out of the House Select Committee hearings if they do their job correctly. Lastly, Lachlan Markey of the Washington Free Beacon reports that he talked to a senior intelligence official who speculates that a huge cash ransom in the millions was paid for Bo Bergdahl's release. Bo Bergdahl is the deserter who was recently rescued from his Mideast captors. At the same time, the Obama administration freed 5 of the worst terrorists being held at Guantanamo Bay. The story gets more complicated because the group holding Bergdahl has always been referred to as the Taliban. The group who actually held him was the Haqqani Network. The difference being that the Taliban is a radical Islamist terrorist army driven by ideology, and the Haqqani are a terrorist group who are in it for the money. Prisoners are useless to the Haqqani unless they can generate money, which is why the intelligence officer believes a ransom had to be paid in cash for Bergdahl. The release of the 5 prisoners from Gitmo was part of a continuing operation of the Obama administration to empty Gitmo, and Bergdahl was used as a pretense to release terrorists from Guantanamo and hide the transfer of millions of dollars to Islamic supremacists. That is the essence of this cover-up. All the while everything I have reported was going on, a little-noticed group called the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, ISIS, was quietly building for their current attack in Iraq. They had been building, publicly, since their founding back in 2006, according to the New York Times, today, June 14th. They are now in the process of taking over Iraq. Some people in government noticed, particularly Army intelligence. But as usual, it was completely missed by the Obama administration. And that story, including the invasion of Iraq, is just getting started. That's it for this edition of Penglis Online News. We at Penglis Online News thank you for watching and encourage you to join us again for our next broadcast of news from a conservative, libertarian perspective. Please feel free to share this report everywhere and subscribe to my YouTube channel. You've got the information. Now do something with it. This is Greg Penglis of Penglis Online News. Good day.